John Davenport here from photography.com with another Let's Edit video. This week I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at two photographs that are of the same general scene but shot using different settings, namely different exposures. So we have this photograph here, which was shot at ISO 200, 70mm f10 and 1/400th of a second. And then if I click on over, we have ISO 200, 70mm f10, but 1/100th of a second. So it's a few stops slower in terms of shutter speed, which allows more light to hit the sensor and thus a brighter image. So I'm going to edit both of these photographs kind of at the same time, or well, we're going to do one edit to one and then kind of step between the two. And that way, my goal is to kind of create the same image from both of these photographs to show you that you can have an underexposed image or an overexposed image, and so long as you're not clipping too much of your data, you can get something that kind of resembles the same image out of both of these. At least that's my goal for this. So let's see how we do. I'm going to start with my underexposed image here, and the first thing I'm going to do is drop in a graduated filter, namely because I know that the foreground here is probably the most problematic. It's the most underexposed area, so we're going to have to even this out quite a bit. And then once I get the foreground evened out, we'll come back to this photo and kind of even the rest of the exposure out. So I'm going to add a little bit of exposure here, and I'm going to add some shadow detail, which will increase and pull out the detail in those shadowy areas. And that's pretty good for a starting point. So let's jump on over here, and much in the same way, my first step is going to be the grad filter again, but I'm going to come in from the top and I'm going to go about halfway down, maybe a little more than halfway down here, and then I'm going to drop the exposure, and instead of playing with the shadow slider, I'm actually going to drop the highlight slider down. And this will help bring more detail into the sky in this image, which was kind of the blown out area of the original photograph. So now let's jump back into our originally underexposed photo and go into our basic tab. And let's see here. I'm going to drop the highlights down a little more, which will help add a little more detail and definition to the clouds. And I'm going to increase my shadows a little bit, which will help, again, bring just a little more detail into the shadowy regions of this photo. And then I'm going to just do my standard whites plus 20, and then blacks maybe minus 20 or so. That's not necessarily going to be the same for every image, but it does. Moving your whites and blacks in opposite directions does tend to stretch out your histogram, which adds contrast. And by being able to stretch your whites out more than your blacks, or in essence set your white point and your black point separately, you're able to get a little more contrast out of the photograph that way. So that's a pretty good start for this photo. I think we're in good shape. Let's jump on over to the originally overexposed image. And again, we're in our basic tab here. So I think for this one, I'm going to want to probably, let's start with bringing out the shadows in the foreground and maybe just a little bit of exposure. Yeah, I'm only going to go like 0.1 on that, and I'm going to drop the highlights down, which again will help add more definition to those clouds there. And then here I'm just going to drop the black slider down. I'm not even going to touch the white slider. So we'll see where we're going. And I'm only going minus 11 on this. I think that's a good area for that. So you can see here where we have maybe a little more contrast and a little more detail in the originally underexposed photo. That's not to say that we can't get there with this photo. We just need to maybe add a little more contrast to the overall scene and maybe just bump up the exposure just a touch more. So I went from 0.1 to 0.2 there, and you can see we're getting much closer here. You're not going to be able to get them exact because they are two different photos, or at least not with a lot of work. But I think we've come pretty close considering our original starting points were here and here. We've come quite far with our two photos. So just to finish this video up, let's just add a little bit more to one of these two photos. You know, they're both very close. I think I like this one here, which was the one that was shot at 1/400th of a second, just a little bit more than the one that was shot at 1/100th of a second. So let's continue on with this photo and just add a little bit more to it. I'm going to bump up the clarity just to add a little bit more of that contrast. Let's go with a little bit more vibrance as well. To add a little bit of color there. You could even add a second graduated filter here and maybe add a little bit of saturation to the sky, or you could maybe add a little bit more yellow there, maybe some magenta, you know, something like that, just to give it a little more color and spice to the photo. This is completely optional, of course. I mean, it's really up to you what you want to do. You don't want to go too far because then it'll be like, yeah, that's not really realistic. So you just want to go with very subtle changes, especially when you're changing your white balance around to only part of the image, because it can be very, very noticeable if you get it a little bit too out of control there. So I think this looks okay. I'm going to bring this kind of way down so that the graduated effect kind of transitions from the top of the screen or the top of the frame all the way into my main photo. And I'm even going to come in and just warm the entire photograph up just a little bit too, which will help even things out. So that's kind of bringing in a little more color and everything there. I think I want to go through and probably just sharpen a little bit. It's not the sharpest of photographs because we have all this fog here, so shooting through fog will often cause your scene to look a little less sharp just because you have the lights kind of bouncing around everywhere. So obviously you're going to lose a little bit of the clarity there, but I want to at least have my hard lines sharp, and especially these trees here. You can see these leaves are pretty sharp, so this is probably a nice area to go and really kind of sharpen that up nice there. And then you know, I could go through, maybe do, there's not a whole lot of noise, but we did recover a lot from the foreground, so we do have a little bit of grain. So you know, you could go through and maybe just touch the luminance noise reduction just a little bit to even out just that little bit of grain there, just to kind of bring it back home. And then you know, you have your standard lens correction. If you want to enable your profile collection, remove your chromatic aberration. You can do some alignment in Photoshop if you want. I'm not going to do that for this particular video, but I think it's pretty well aligned in general there. So I am actually, you know, now that I'm looking at this, I'm thinking I'm going to delete this. Let's see. I'm not sure. I thought, you know, I was thinking that maybe it was causing this kind of sharp color drop off here, but when I remove it, it's actually still there. So that could just be an effect of the sun, which is actually rising to the left of this frame. It's actually, I'm facing close to south, I believe, in this photograph. So east would be to the left, is that correct? And west would be to the right. So that is kind of the general direction that this is facing. So we're getting the sun from the left-hand side of the frame, and you can see it from the clouds here. So because there's kind of hills in the way, my guess is that we're actually seeing this color effect not hitting the base of the valley here, but only these clouds here, and that's kind of what's causing it. So maybe it's okay to leave that extra color in to spice it up just a little bit. But let me know in the comments what you think, and did you learn something from this video, kind of seeing the two ways of going about editing the same scene? I hope you did. So anyway, thank you for watching. I'll see you again soon, and for those of you who are curious, I have a new show which starts this Friday. It's called Photogropathy's Focus, and I'm really excited about it, so I hope you tune in. And if you're watching this after, a while from now, there'll be a playlist, Photogropathy's Focus, with all those videos in it. So anyway, just some new stuff happening at the channel. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.